The wind howled through the city like a desperate whisper, threading between glass towers and deserted alleyways. Ethan Blake tightened the collar of his trench coat as he exited his office building, the bitter cold biting at his skin despite the layers. Wall Street was quieter than usual for a Friday evening, a storm warning casting a shadow over the usual hustle. He didn't mind the silence. In fact, he craved it. Silence was the one companion that never demanded anything from him. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. As he stepped onto the sidewalk, a flash of movement caught his eye near the subway entrance. A woman, crouched beside a cardboard sign, was wrapping her arms around two sleeping children. Her coat was threadbare, barely more than fabric, and her hair clung to her face in soaked strands. Ethan meant to keep walking, but something, a gut punch he couldn't explain, stopped him cold. There was something familiar in the curve of her face, the way her shoulders hunched in defeat. He moved closer, not trusting his instincts but unable to ignore them either. The woman looked up, perhaps sensing the weight of his stare, and their eyes locked. His breath left his body in one violent rush. "Grace," he murmured. Her expression didn't change at first. Disbelief, confusion, then fear. "Ethan?" she whispered, her voice cracking like old porcelain. It had been over 10 years since high school, but that voice still had the power to undo him. She looked away, pressing her hands around her daughters protectively. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you," Ethan replied, kneeling beside her. The girls, twins maybe 5 years old, stirred slightly but remained curled under a threadbare blanket. "What happened to you?" He asked, softer this time. Grace shook her head, blinking back tears. "It doesn't matter. Please, just walk away." But Ethan couldn't. Wouldn't. "I'm not leaving you out here in this weather with 2 kids." Her eyes snapped up. "I don't need charity," she hissed. "It's not charity. It's the least I can do." For a long moment she stared at him, gauging if the Ethan Blake she remembered was still inside this sharply dressed man. Then, reluctantly, she nodded. "Just for the night. Nothing more." Ethan rose, dialing his driver. "We'll talk later." The black car pulled up, its warmth a sharp contrast to the icy night. Ethan helped Grace in, careful not to disturb the children. One of them whimpered in her sleep, and Grace hushed her gently. In the car's dim light, Ethan studied her face, thinner than he remembered, haunted. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. She didn't answer. The silence between them was not peaceful. It was heavy, crackling with everything unsaid. They reached Ethan's penthouse in Tribeca in under 20 minutes. The doorman raised an eyebrow as they entered, but said nothing. Grace hovered at the threshold, her shoes wet and torn. "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "Come in." She stepped forward as if walking into someone else's life. The warmth of the space hit her first, followed by the scent of cedar and clean linen. She clutched the girls tighter, unsure of where to go. Ethan led them to a guest room with an ensuite bathroom. "You can stay here. There are clothes in the dresser, food in the kitchen, whatever you need." Grace set the girls down carefully, removing their wet socks. "Thank you," she said quietly, not looking at him. "Get some rest," he replied. "We'll talk in the morning." She nodded. But as Ethan left the room, he could feel her, eyes on his back, wary, wondering. In his own room, Ethan sat at the edge of his bed, head in his hands. Grace Miller, homeless, with children. It didn't make sense. In high school, she had been magnetic, radiant, always surrounded by friends, laughter in her wake. He remembered watching her from across the cafeteria, never brave enough to say what he felt. And now she was here. Shadows where stars used to be. He needed answers. The storm hit just after midnight. Rain lashed against the windows like fingers tapping a warning. Ethan couldn't sleep. He made coffee and stood by the glass wall of his living room, staring at the stormlit city. Behind him, the soft shuffle of footsteps. He turned. Grace stood in the doorway, barefoot, wrapped in one of his bathrobes. "I couldn't sleep," she said. He gestured to the chair. "Me neither." She sat, fingers wrapped around the mug. He handed her. "I didn't want you to see me like this," she said. "I never imagined I'd fall this far." Ethan's throat tightened. "What happened, Grace?" She looked at him, eyes rimmed in red. "It's a long story." He met her gaze. "I'm not going anywhere." She gave a small, bitter laugh. Famous last words. He didn't smile. "Try me." There was a long pause. Then, slowly, she began. "After graduation, I left town. Thought I had everything figured out. I didn't." Her voice trembled. "I trusted the wrong man. Lost everything trying to make it work. And when I finally walked away, there was no one left to call. No one who would understand." Ethan listened, not interrupting. Her pain filled the room, like smoke. She continued, her words spilling faster. "We slept in cars, shelters when we could. Sometimes I thought about giving them up, just so they'd be safe. But I couldn't. I couldn't let them go." Her voice broke and she looked down. Ethan reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Grace stared at him like he was speaking another language. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me after all this time?" Ethan looked at her, his voice steady. "Because you're not just anyone to me, Grace. You never were." Her breath caught. The rain roared outside like applause. In that moment, neither of them spoke, but something had shifted. An old flame reignited, not with passion, but with the slow-burning heat of redemption. Ethan stood. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." Grace nodded, but he could see she was still trying to process it all. As she disappeared down the hallway, he whispered to himself, "I'll fix this, whatever it takes." And outside, the storm raged on. Morning arrived slowly, gray light filtering through the curtains like a hesitant promise. Ethan had been awake for hours, the memory of Grace's confession running on a loop through his thoughts. He hadn't planned any of this. Not the reunion, not the emotional avalanche that came with it. But now that she was here, he couldn't ignore the pull. There was something unfinished between them, something that demanded reckoning. In the guest room, Grace stirred to the muffled sounds of the city below. The girls were still asleep. Their small forms curled beneath the thick duvet, finally warm. She watched them for a moment, her heart a mix of love and sorrow. Then she sat up slowly, wincing at the ache in her back, the kind of ache that came from years of concrete beds and borrowed time. Her gaze fell on a folded sweater resting on the dresser, clean and soft. A gesture from Ethan. Her throat tightened. She padded quietly to the kitchen, following the faint scent of coffee. Ethan stood by the stove, his back turned, sleeves rolled up. He looked nothing like the boy she used to know, and yet everything like him. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, offering a half smile. "Coffee?" She nodded. He poured a mug and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed for a second too long, and she stepped back instinctively. They sat at the island in silence for a while. Grace took slow sips of the coffee, grateful for the warmth it brought. "The girls slept well," she said eventually. "That's good," Ethan replied. "They deserve to." She nodded, staring into the mug. "I didn't come here looking for help. I just didn't know where else to go." He leaned forward, his voice steady. "You didn't come. I found you." She met his eyes. "Same thing, isn't it?" "No," he said, firmly. "It's not." He hesitated, then asked, "Do they know about him?" Grace's eyes darkened. "No. They just know he's not around." "Do you want to tell them?" She shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. There's nothing to tell." He left before they were born. Never looked back. Ethan exhaled slowly. Grace, I know it's none of my business, but if he ever tries to come back— He won't, she interrupted. People like him don't turn around. They vanish. And they stay gone. The girls woke up soon after, their laughter a bright interruption to the heavy mood. Ethan watched as Grace softened around them, her smile tentative but real. The way she knelt to fix Hazel's braid or wiped jam off Harper's chin, it was maternal instinct etched in exhaustion. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. This woman had fought through hell to keep her children alive, and she had done it alone. Later that afternoon, Grace wandered into the study, her eyes scanning the bookshelves. She found a photo of Ethan with his parents. A formal pose. Smiles. Too forced. They're gone? She asked, holding the frame. Yeah, Ethan said from the doorway. Car accident. 5 years ago. I'm sorry, she said. He nodded. We weren't close. Not really. She placed the frame back carefully. Still, grief leaves marks. So does survival, he replied, and their eyes met across the room. Why did you leave town after high school? He asked. Grace sighed, sitting down. To escape. My dad drank. My mom was a ghost. I thought running would fix everything. Did it? For a while, she said, until I realized I was running in circles. Ethan sat beside her, the silence between them different now, charged with memories, with years they'd lived separately but somehow in parallel. You're stronger than I remembered, he said quietly. You didn't know me at all back then, she replied. A week passed like a breath held too long. Grace stayed, at first hesitant, then gradually more comfortable. She cooked breakfast, helped clean, told the twins bedtime stories. Ethan gave her space but remained present, always one step behind, waiting. One night, as she stood at the balcony watching the city lights, he joined her. You ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently? He asked. She didn't look at him. All the time. He turned to face her. Maybe it's not too late for different. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You don't owe me anything, Ethan. Not kindness, not shelter, not this hope. It's not about debt, he said. It's about choice. And I'm choosing to be here. Grace looked at him then, really looked, and something in her gaze cracked open. I don't know if I can let anyone in again, she whispered. Then let me stay just outside the door, he said, until you're ready. That night, Grace cried silently in the dark, not from sadness but from the unfamiliar weight of being seen. Ethan lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew he wasn't letting her disappear again. Outside, snow began to fall, painting the city in quiet white, and for the first time in years, Grace dreamed without fear. The snow hadn't stopped. For 3 days, the city moved slower, wrapped in white silence. Ethan adjusted his schedule, working from home more often, but he didn't tell Grace the reason. He just wanted to be around. She still moved cautiously, like a guest unsure of how long the invitation would last. But the children were thriving. That mattered most to her. Their laughter filled the penthouse like sunlight cracking open an abandoned room. One morning, Ethan found Grace standing in front of the mirror in the guest room, holding one of his donated coats against her chest. She didn't see him watching. Her reflection was distant, almost unreadable. Fits you, he said softly. She jumped, embarrassed. Sorry, I didn't mean to. You don't have to explain, he interrupted. This is your home, too, for as long as you need it. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. That's what I'm afraid of. Needing it. Later that afternoon, Grace took the girls to the park with Ethan's driver. She needed air, movement, distance, even if just for an hour. As she watched Harper and Hazel toss snow into the sky, She felt something stir in her chest. Joy. The real kind. She almost didn't recognize it. Then her phone buzzed. A private number. She hesitated, then answered. "Grace," the voice said, cold, familiar. "You've been busy." Her blood froze. She turned away from the children, her voice sharp. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, "I heard you're doing well. Living large now, huh? Must be nice after everything." Grace's stomach twisted. "Don't call me again," she snapped, hanging up before he could reply. She stood there, her breath fogging in the air, fingers trembling. The past never stayed buried. It always clawed its way back, no matter how deep she pushed it down. When they returned to the penthouse, Ethan immediately noticed her shift. Her smile was too forced, her hands too still. "Everything okay?" he asked as she removed the girls' coats. "Just tired," she replied quickly. "Long day." But her eyes betrayed her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced the hallway, finally settling at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea. Ethan found her there, staring at nothing. "You're shaking," he said gently. "Bad dream?" She didn't answer at first. Then, "I got a call today, from him." Ethan's jaw tensed. "What did he say?" "Nothing that matters," she replied. But it was enough. Her hands clenched the cup. "I thought he'd forgotten about us. Turns out he was just waiting to see if we'd survive long enough to be worth something again." Ethan leaned forward. "Do you want me to find him?" She looked up, startled. "No, that's not your burden." The next day, Grace asked Ethan for something she hadn't in years, paper and a pen. She sat at the desk in the guest room and wrote her daughter's letters. Not because she planned to leave, but because she knew life had a cruel sense of timing, and if something ever happened, they deserved her truth. She folded the pages carefully, sealing them in envelopes marked only with their names. Then she hid them beneath the dresser drawer. Ethan noticed she was quieter that week, more focused but also more distant. One evening, he found her watching the news with an unreadable expression. "Is it him?" he asked. She didn't look, away from the screen. He was never really gone, just silent. Men like him, they don't stop. They wait. Ethan sat beside her, tension rippling under his skin. "What did he do to you?" Grace turned to him, eyes hollow. "What didn't he?" She told him more that night than she had told anyone. About the bruises that didn't fade. The nights. She curled around the girls in motel rooms while he disappeared for days. The way her voice became quieter, her presence smaller, just to keep them safe. "I lost myself a long time ago," she said. "I'm just now learning how to breathe again." Ethan reached for her hand, not as a savior, but as a witness. "You're still here. That means something." The following day, Ethan made calls, not to track the man down, not yet, but to set protections in motion. Grace didn't need revenge. She needed safety. He hired private security, changed all the locks, set up surveillance. Grace didn't argue. She just watched him work with a strange mix of gratitude and dread. "You're not just helping," she said quietly. "You're investing." "Why?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Because I'm not afraid of your past." That night, as the girls slept soundly, Grace stepped into Ethan's office. He was working late, his desk flooded with papers and lamplight. "You never asked me why I left without saying goodbye," she said. He looked up, surprised. "I figured you had your reasons." "I did," she said, "but I also had regrets." Ethan stood, walking slowly toward her. "Then, maybe we both get to start over." She smiled, faintly. "You keep saying that." He paused in front of her. "And I'll keep saying it until you believe it." In the quiet space between them, something shifted. Not romance, not yet, but trust, the rarest currency between two people fractured by life. Grace nodded, almost to herself. Then let's see where this goes. Outside, the snow began to melt, but inside the penthouse, something new was beginning to take root. Ethan had a routine. Wake at 6, run 5 miles, drink coffee black, scan the markets, and avoid the room at the end of the hallway. It had been closed for years, untouched since the day he locked it. Grace noticed it only once, the faint shimmer of dust on the doorknob, the silence that hung around it like fog. She didn't ask, but something about it felt sacred or dangerous. She couldn't decide which. The girls thrived in the penthouse. They laughed more, slept better. Harper, the more talkative, twin, had started drawing again, pages filled with bright houses and smiling suns. Hazel remained quieter, more observant, often watching Ethan with eyes too wise for her age. One afternoon, she walked up to him with her tiny notebook and said, "Do you miss someone too?" Ethan froze. "What makes you ask that?" "Because Mommy does," she said, then skipped away. Grace had started applying to jobs. Secretly. She didn't want to be a burden any longer. She found an opening at a bookstore downtown. Part-time, low pay, but stable. When she told Ethan, he didn't object. He just said, "Do what makes you feel like you again." His support was consistent, unwavering, but Grace could sense a restlessness in him, like a man keeping pace with a clock only he could hear. One night, while Ethan was out meeting investors, Grace explored the apartment, looking for a blanket. She opened a hallway closet, then another, and then paused before the door. The forbidden one. It wasn't locked. Slowly, she turned the handle and stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the dim light. The room was pristine, untouched. A nursery. Soft green walls, tiny clothes still folded in drawers, a rocking chair by the window. Her heart clenched. When Ethan came home, she was sitting at the dining table, waiting. Her face was pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He froze. "You went inside." "I didn't mean to. I was looking for something else." Silence. Then he sat down slowly. "Her name was Lily," he said. "My daughter. She died before her first birthday." Grace felt the air leave her lungs. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said. "You didn't know." He told her everything. About the accident. About the woman he once loved. A pianist named Claire. About the night he came home to an empty crib and a note. Claire had driven into a storm, taking Lily with her. No one knew why. The crash report said she'd been speeding. Ethan had never reopened that room. Not until now. "I built this empire because I didn't know what else to do with the pain," he said. "But it never really went away." Grace reached across the table, her hand trembling as it covered his. "You've carried this alone for too long." "And you haven't?" he replied. They stared at each other, two people haunted by different ghosts but walking the same path. That night, they didn't sleep. They talked. About grief, about love, about the moments that break us and the ones that stitch us back together. In the following days, something softened in Ethan. He joined the girls at breakfast, laughed more, played board games. Hazel, ever watchful, began drawing him into her little sketches. No longer an outsider, but part of the picture. One evening, she handed him a crayon drawing of 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a tree. "That's us," she said. Ethan nodded, his throat thick. "It's perfect." Grace watched him with a kind of awe. She had expected strength from Ethan. Discipline, protection. What she hadn't expected was tenderness. He carried her past without flinching, and that made her wonder if she could do the same for him. One rainy afternoon, she returned to the nursery and placed a small potted plant by the window. Something alive, something new. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. Ethan found it later that evening and stood there, unmoving. The plant wasn't just decoration. It was a declaration. You can heal. You can grow. You don't have to forget to begin again. He didn't say anything to Grace that night. He just placed a second plant beside it the next day. No words exchanged. But the message was clear. They were both choosing life again. And still, shadows lingered. One morning, Ethan received a letter with no return address. Inside was a photograph. Grace, on the street, holding Hazel's hand. Ethan stared at it, his hands trembling. On the back, "People like her don't change. Don't be a fool." He didn't tell Grace, not yet, but as he burned the letter in the fireplace, he knew one thing for sure: someone was watching. The fire crackled quietly in the living room, its warmth unable to soothe the chill Ethan felt in his chest. The photograph haunted him, not because of Grace's face, but because of the implication. Someone out there knew where she was, and they didn't want her to be safe. He hadn't told her, not yet. She was finally starting to breathe again, and he couldn't bring himself to steal that away. Grace was in the kitchen, humming softly while making tea. The girls were coloring at the table, completely at peace. Ethan watched them from a distance, his jaw clenched. He needed to know who was behind the message. Someone from her past, obviously. But how close? He picked up his phone and dialed a contact. Private security, someone he trusted. "I need discreet surveillance on the building, starting tonight." That evening, Grace noticed Ethan was distracted. "You've barely touched your food," she said as she cut Hazel's meatballs. He forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." "Business?" she asked, studying him. He nodded. "Something like that." She didn't push, but the unease was mutual. That night, as the girls slept, Grace stood on the balcony, staring at the skyline. Ethan joined her, silently. "Do you ever feel like something's coming?" she asked. "Like a storm you can't see, but you know is there?" He hesitated. "Yeah," he said. "All the time." She turned to him, her eyes tired. "I've been pretending to be okay, but I'm not. I don't know how to stop watching over my shoulder." Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "Maybe you don't need to stop. Maybe you just need someone else to do it with you." Grace didn't reply. But for the first time, she leaned her head on his shoulder. The next day, the girls were invited to a playdate by another family in the building. Grace hesitated, but agreed. She needed a few hours to think, to breathe, to figure out what was happening inside her. Ethan offered to walk them downstairs. As the elevator closed, he noticed a man watching from the lobby. Sunglasses, hood up. The kind of man who didn't belong. He followed him outside but lost him in the snow. Back upstairs, Grace sat alone on the couch, flipping through a photo album Ethan had left on the coffee table. Old pictures, childhood memories. Then she found a photo tucked behind another. It wasn't Ethan, it was her, much younger. Holding a violin. From high school. Her hands trembled. "How did this get here?" she whispered. Ethan came back in just as she stood. "Ethan," she said, holding up the photo. "Where did you get this?" He paused, knowing the truth couldn't wait any longer. "I've had it since senior year," he admitted. "I kept it." She stared at him. "You kept a photo of me for over a decade." He nodded. "You were more than just a memory, Grace. You were the person I wanted to be brave for, even if I never said it." Her voice caught. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything," he said. "Just know that I saw you even then." That night, Ethan reviewed the building's security footage. The man from the lobby hadn't entered, but he had lingered for over an hour. Watching. Waiting. The security team identified him. A former associate of Grace's ex. Arrest record. History of intimidation. Ethan's pulse quickened. He forwarded the information to his legal team. "I want a restraining order. Today." Grace noticed the shift in Ethan's energy. She cornered him in the hallway. "You're hiding something. What is it?" He exhaled. "Someone's been watching the building. I didn't want to scare you." You think it's him? I think it's someone working for him. Grace went cold. I should have known. He never lets go. He waits until you feel safe. Then he breaks you all over again. Ethan stepped closer. You're not going to break, Grace. Not this time. Not with me here. She didn't answer. But later that night, she packed a small bag and hid it under the bed. Old habits returning. Just in case. When Ethan found it, he didn't confront her. He just sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "You don't need to run anymore." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. Maybe I don't, but I still remember how. The tension in the air grew thicker with each passing day. Grace walked the halls like a shadow of herself. The girls noticed too. Quieter, clinging more. One night, Harper asked, "Mommy, are we leaving again?" Grace held her tightly. "No, sweetheart, not this time." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it, and Ethan, watching from the hallway, made a silent promise. Whoever is coming for her will go through me first. It started with a knock. Not a pounding, not a frantic hammering, just a knock. Quiet. Too quiet. Grace was in the kitchen, rinsing plates, the girls watching a cartoon nearby. Ethan was still at the office. When she heard the sound, she froze, every instinct firing at once. It wasn't the sound itself. It was what it meant. The past had arrived, and it was knocking gently, as if it belonged. She walked slowly to the door, her heart hammering. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man in a black coat, head down, hands in his pockets. She didn't recognize him, but something in the posture made her stomach twist. She backed away, her breath shallow. Another knock. Calm. Unhurried. She picked up her phone and dialed Ethan. No answer. Another call. Still nothing. Then the man spoke, his voice muffled but clear. "Grace, I know you're in there." Her blood turned to ice. It was him. Not the man from the photo. Not a stranger. Him. The voice she'd tried to erase from every memory. "Open the door, Grace," he said. "We need to talk." She backed further, motioned to the girls. "Into the bedroom," she whispered. "Now." They obeyed instantly, sensing the fear in her voice. She locked the bedroom behind them, then stood in the hallway trembling. The knocking stopped. A pause. Then footsteps. Fading. She ran to the peephole again. He was gone. For now. She collapsed against the door, gasping. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. She answered instantly. "He was here," she said. "Outside the door." "I'm on my way," he said. "Stay inside. Don't open for anyone." "I didn't," she whispered. "But I almost did. I almost opened it, Ethan." Her voice cracked. "Why is he here now?" Ethan arrived in record time. Grace ran to him the moment the door opened, and for the first time he saw her truly break. Not just sadness or exhaustion, but terror, pure and raw. He held her tightly, stroking her hair. "It's over," he said. "He won't get near you again." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure. This wasn't a message anymore. This was a threat. He checked the cameras. The man had known exactly where the blind spots were. That meant planning, information. Someone had told him where she was. Ethan called the security team and gave one order: lockdown. No one enters. No one leaves. Extra men on every floor, armed. Grace tried to calm the girls, telling them everything was fine, but Harper clung to her leg, and Hazel cried silently into a pillow. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. Neither did Grace. They sat. On opposite ends of the couch, the air between them thick with what hadn't been said. "I should have told you sooner," Grace whispered. "He's worse than I let on." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me apologies. You did what you had to do to survive." "No," she said. "I mean before. Back then. In high school. I saw you. I knew you cared. and I didn't let myself care back." He looked at her, the pain and affection in his eyes impossible to hide. "You were never cruel, Grace. Just scared." She nodded. "Still am." He reached for her hand. "Then let's be scared together." She clung to it like a lifeline. Outside, the snow had returned, silent and suffocating. The city below had no idea that on the 43rd floor a battle was beginning. One not of fists, but of ghosts. 2 days passed without another sign, but the silence was worse. Grace jumped at every creak, every buzz of the intercom. Ethan tried to distract her. Books, music, even dancing with the girls in the living room. For brief moments, laughter returned, but every night she checked the locks twice. 3 times. Her past had knocked, and even though she hadn't opened the door, a part of her feared he'd already slipped inside. Ethan began working from home permanently. He didn't tell his board, didn't explain. He just did what he always did when something truly mattered. He protected it. One afternoon, Grace sat beside him in the office. "I hate this," she said, "feeling like a prisoner." "Then we fight," he said. "We don't hide. We build a case. We bring him down." She looked at him. "You'd do that? For you? For them?" "Absolutely." The legal process began that week. Restraining orders, evidence compiled, witnesses contacted. Grace recorded her statement, voice trembling but firm. "His name is Adam North, and I'm done being afraid of him." Ethan stood behind the glass, watching her through the booth. Something shifted in him that day. Not just admiration, something deeper, something irreversible. That night, as she tucked in the girls, Harper asked, "Are we safe now, Mommy?" Grace kissed her forehead. "We're safer than we've ever been." And for the first time, she believed it. But outside, beyond the layers of security and glass and comfort, Adam watched from a distance. He wasn't gone. Not yet. And as he lit a cigarette in the cold, he whispered to himself, "Let the game begin." Ethan increased the security without telling Grace every detail. She already had enough shadows trailing her. He didn't want to give her new ones to fear. But he knew the silence wasn't safety. It was strategy. Adam had always been more patient than violent. He waited. He watched. He made people unravel themselves before ever lifting a hand. That's what made him dangerous. Grace started receiving strange emails. No sender, no subject line, just blank messages with old photos attached. Her from 5 years ago, pushing a stroller. Her outside a shelter. Her asleep in a subway station. The timestamps sent a clear message. He'd never stopped watching. She didn't tell Ethan at first. She wanted to pretend it was a ghost, that acknowledging it would give it power. But ghosts feed on silence. Ethan found her curled up in the bathroom, the phone clenched in her fist. He knelt beside her, gently taking it. When he saw the images, his expression darkened. "You should have told me." "I didn't want to scare you," she said, her voice brittle. "Grace," he said, softly but firmly, "I'm already scared, but hiding this won't protect us. It only gives him the edge." She nodded, tears welling. "I hate that he still has power over me." "We'll take it back," Ethan promised, bit by bit. That night he made a new call. To someone, outside legal circles. A fixer, former intelligence. He didn't like using that world, but Adam wasn't playing by civil rules, and if Ethan wanted to win, he had to stop pretending this was a game with rules. Grace sensed something shifting, in him, a hardness behind the kindness. It scared her, not because of what it meant for Adam, but for Ethan. The girls remained oblivious, or so they pretended. Hazel began drawing shadows again, tall, looming shapes beside stick figures of her mother. Harper grew more protective, clinging to Grace whenever she left a room. One morning, Hazel quietly placed her drawing on Ethan's desk. "Keep her safe," she said, then walked away. He stared at the drawing long after she left. Grace returned to therapy, encouraged by Ethan. For the first time, she began to speak the words she'd buried: manipulation, gaslighting, control. "He made me believe I deserved the pain," she told the therapist, "that without him, I'd be nothing. And the worst part, I started to believe it." Her voice trembled but didn't break. She was tired of breaking. It was time to rebuild. Ethan planned a weekend getaway for the four of them. A cabin in Vermont, far from the city, far from eyes. Grace hesitated at first. What if he follows? "Let him," Ethan said. "He'll find locked gates and armed guards." "Let's live, Grace, just for a weekend." She agreed, and the girls were ecstatic. The drive up was quiet but peaceful. Grace stared at the snow-covered trees like she was trying to remember what peace felt like. The cabin was simple but warm. Wooden beams, a fireplace, a frozen lake. Nearby, the girls made snow angels while Ethan and Grace watched from the porch. "You're good with them," she said. "They love you." "I love them," Ethan replied, then looked at her. "And I love you, Grace." She went still. "I know it's early," he continued, "and I don't expect anything back. But I needed to say it out loud, because I don't want to regret silence anymore." She turned to him, eyes wide and unreadable. "I don't know what I feel yet," she whispered, "but I know I don't want to lose this. Any of this." He nodded. "That's enough." They stood together in the cold, two people learning to be something new. Not broken, not survivors, just together. But peace never lingers for long. That night, a phone buzzed, an unknown number. Ethan picked it up. One sentence played in, a distorted voice. "Hope you're enjoying the view, Ethan. It's the last one you'll get." Then silence. No trace. No call history. Just that voice, lingering like poison in the air. Ethan didn't wake Grace, but he didn't sleep either. He stood by the window, a gun now tucked under his waistband, eyes scanning the tree line. This wasn't just psychological anymore. Adam was escalating, and if Ethan had to choose between law and war, he already knew where he stood. He would burn down everything to keep her safe. They returned from Vermont in silence. The girls had fallen asleep in the back seat, their cheeks pink from cold, their arms still clinging to stuffed animals. But Grace sat stiffly beside Ethan, watching the road like it might split open beneath them. She hadn't asked why he barely slept the last 2 nights. She didn't need to. Something had shifted in him. A quiet rage, almost invisible, but she could feel it in his stillness. Back at the penthouse, Grace settled the girls, tucked them in, kissed their foreheads. She lingered in the doorway, watching them breathe. Then she turned and found Ethan waiting in the hallway, eyes heavy. "We need to talk," she said. Nodded. They went to the balcony, the same place where so much had been said and left unsaid. The wind had teeth that night, biting through her sweater. "You've changed," she said, "since the call." Ethan didn't flinch. "Yes." "What did he say?" He looked at her, then away. "That we were being watched. That it wouldn't last." Grace stepped closer. "And now you're armed." Ethan didn't answer, but the tension in his jaw confirmed it. She exhaled. "I'm scared of him. But I'm starting to be scared of you, too." That hit harder than he expected. "I'm not him," Ethan said quietly. "No," she replied. "But you're capable of the same darkness, just with a different reason." He looked down at his hands. "I don't care about the law anymore, Grace. I care about survival. I care about you." She nodded, slow. "But I won't trade one cage for another, even if yours has better locks." His eyes widened, but she held his gaze. "You have to let me breathe." The next day, Grace went to the police herself. She filed a formal complaint, requested a security escort. She wanted it to be her voice on the record, not Ethan's. "This isn't about revenge," she told the officer. "It's about freedom." When she returned home, Ethan was quiet. Not angry, thoughtful. "You did the right thing," he said. She didn't expect that. "Thank you," she replied, "for stepping back." That night, a gift appeared at the penthouse door. No card, just a box. Grace opened it slowly. Inside was a tiny music box. Silver, intricate. When she wound it, it played a familiar tune. A lullaby she used to hum to the twins. One no one else could have known. Her hands trembled. She dropped it. It hit the floor with a metallic clink. The song played on. Ethan entered moments later, saw her pale face, the box on the floor. He didn't need to ask. He picked it up and smashed it against the wall. "That's it," he muttered. "No more waiting." Grace blocked his path. "You promised." "No. War." "This isn't war," he said. "It's survival." She shook her head. "No, it's obsession." And just like that, a line was drawn. Not between them, but between their fears. The following morning, Ethan was gone before sunrise. Grace found a note on the counter. "Don't worry, I'll fix this." She paced the apartment, her mind spinning. That afternoon, her phone buzzed. A video. Ethan, in a parking lot, confronting Adam. No sound, just images. A shove, a fist, a gun drawn. Grace dropped the phone. She knew the man Ethan used to be, but this man, this one, was new. Hours passed. No word. She called. Every contact he'd given her. Nothing. Finally, close to midnight, the door opened. Ethan walked in, his knuckles bruised, his shirt torn. She stared at him. "What did you do?" "I warned him," he said, "and now he knows. If he comes near you again, I won't just ruin him, I'll end him." Grace backed away. "This isn't who you are." "It's who I have to be," he replied. She shook her head. "No, Ethan. I don't want a knight. I don't want a soldier. I want someone who lets me fight." He stepped forward. "And I'm letting you. But you're not alone. Not anymore." She didn't move. "If you cross that line again, if you become what you hate, I'll take the girls and leave. Do you understand?" The silence between them stretched tight. Then Ethan nodded. "Yes, I do." That night they sat in silence beside the fireplace. No words, just presence, just wait. Outside, the city breathed on, but inside, two people who had crossed fire lines now stood still, together, yet apart. And in a dark room across town, Adam watched a screen, paused the footage of Ethan's, punch, rewound, played it again, smiled. "Now," he said, "we break them." The apartment felt colder the next morning. Not physically, the heat still hummed softly through the vents, but emotionally. Something invisible had settled in the walls. A distance. Ethan sat at the table with the girls, trying to keep things normal. He poured cereal, asked about cartoons, laughed at their jokes, but his eyes were fixed on the front door, like he expected it to open with another threat. Grace stayed in the bedroom longer than usual. When she finally emerged, her expression was unreadable. She greeted the girls, kissed their foreheads, and joined them at the table without a word to Ethan. He didn't press her, but the silence between them had weight now. A heaviness made of everything they hadn't said. And one thing that shouldn't have happened, the video. She didn't ask where he got it, or how Adam knew to record it. She didn't have to. In her gut, she knew. Adam was playing a deeper game. And now, he'd planted the one seed that could grow into everything Ethan feared: doubt. Grace left later that afternoon to meet her lawyer. When she returned, Ethan was waiting in the hallway. "We need to talk," he said. "Not now," she replied. "Please." He followed her inside anyway. I know you're angry. I'm scared, she corrected. That's not the same. I did it to protect you. No, you did. It to prove you could win. Her words were sharp, but not cruel. You said you'd let me fight. Then you went to war without me. Ethan's hands dropped to his sides. You think I'm becoming like him? Grace shook her head. No, but you're starting to speak his language, and that terrifies me. That night, they barely spoke. The girls noticed. Harper asked, Are you and Ethan mad at each other? Grace smiled weakly. No, baby, just tired. But even Harper didn't believe that. Hazel drew another picture. This time, the four of them were holding hands, but two of the hands were unraveling. Like string, Grace found it under her pillow. It broke her in ways she didn't understand. The next morning, a letter arrived. No envelope. Just a folded page slipped under the door. Grace opened it with shaking fingers. It wasn't from Adam. It was from someone else, a woman. The handwriting was neat, elegant. It read, You don't know who he really is. You think he's saving you, but he's been watching you for years. Ask him about the dossier. Below it, a phone number. Grace sat down hard on the couch, her mind racing. She remembered the photo Ethan had, the one of her in high school. She had thought it romantic, sweet even. But now, it felt different. A dossier? She called the number. A woman answered. Calm, polished. Grace. Who is this? Someone who thought you should know the truth. Ethan's not your savior. He's your spectator. He's been following your file for years, before you ever reconnected. Grace's voice trembled. That's not possible. Isn't it? The woman said. Ask him how he found you. Ask why he was already in that neighborhood that day. It wasn't chance. It was choice. The line went dead. Grace stared at the phone, her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe it was a lie, a trick, but now she had to know. That evening, she waited for Ethan in the office. When he arrived, tired and disheveled, she didn't move. Tell me the truth, she said. All of it. He froze. About what? About how you found me that night. The file, the photo, the woman who called me. Ethan's face changed. Not guilt, not shame. Something deeper. Regret. Grace, don't lie to me, she said. Not now. He sat slowly, his hands open. After Claire and Lily, I lost myself. I stopped believing people changed. I started investing in redemption stories. Quietly. I never contacted anyone. Just followed their progress. Yours was one of them. Grace blinked. You followed me? Yes, he said. Not for long. Just enough to know where you were. When I saw you on that sidewalk, it wasn't an accident. I had hoped I'd never need to step in. She stood, her entire body tense. You watched me suffer, watched my daughters starve, and did nothing. I didn't want to be another man in your life trying to control you, he said. So you waited for the story to get dramatic enough? No, he said, pained. I waited for you to still have dignity. I didn't want to save a victim. I wanted to help someone who was still fighting. The words hit like stones. Grace turned away. I need time, she whispered, to think, to feel, because right now, I don't know if I'm hurt or betrayed. Ethan didn't try to stop her. As she walked out of the room, the door clicked shut like a verdict, and outside the penthouse, someone watched from the street, phone in hand, whispering, It's working. Grace didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding like it was racing against time. Every word Ethan said echoed in her mind. Every pause, every justification. I followed your file. It sounded clinical, cold. Even if his reasons were wrapped in grief and guilt, the truth hurt more than she expected. She had spent months trying to reclaim her autonomy, only to discover it had been watched all along. Ethan slept on the couch, not because she asked him to, but because he knew he should. The air between them had changed. It wasn't a fight, it wasn't anger, it was silence, deep and dangerous, like a cliff before the fall. He replayed the moment she walked away, the pain in her voice. He had sworn to protect her. Instead, he had become another wound. By morning, they barely spoke. Grace dressed the girls, packed their lunches, kissed their foreheads. When Ethan offered to walk them to school, she hesitated, then nodded. The girls needed stability, even if their world was cracking. After they left, Grace stood in the kitchen, fingers trembling on the countertop. Her phone buzzed. Another message. Unknown number. Just one line. Now he knows what it feels like to be powerless. She dropped the phone. Her breath caught. This wasn't just about her anymore. Adam was watching everything. From inside now. The messages weren't warnings anymore. They were trophies. She picked up the phone, dialed the police. "I want a trace," she said. "I want this stopped. I want him gone." The officer's voice was calm. "We're doing everything we can, Ms. Miller." "It's not enough," she whispered. "It's never enough." Later that day, Grace returned to the penthouse to find her letters gone, the ones she had written to Harper and Hazel, the ones she hid under the drawer. Her hands searched frantically. Nothing. Then she found a note taped to the mirror, in Adam's handwriting. Beautiful words. Too bad they'll never read. "Them if you keep trusting liars," she screamed, loud, raw, the kind of scream that breaks silence like glass. Ethan ran in seconds later. "What happened?" She held out the note with shaking hands. "He was here, in this room, in our room." Ethan read the note, his expression darkening. "No one got past the guards." "He didn't need to," she snapped. "You let him in months ago, when you decided to turn me into a story." Ethan flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" she asked. "Because it feels very fair right now." He tried to reach her. "Grace, please. Don't." Her voice cracked. "I believed you were different, that you were helping because you saw me, not because you were writing the final chapter." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I never wanted to control you." "Then why do I feel owned?" she asked. "Why do I feel like everything was orchestrated?" Silence. Then, quietly. "Because maybe I did want to save something, when I couldn't save her." That stopped her. Claire. Lily. The ghosts in Ethan's life he never outran. Grace stared at him, her anger dimming, replaced by something colder. "You didn't see me, Ethan. You saw a second chance, but I'm not a stand-in for the family you lost." Ethan looked like he had been slapped. "You're right," he said, "but I never wanted you to be. I wanted you, the real you, and I ruined it." She turned away. "I need space." "Grace." "Please," she said. "For the girls. For me. Let me breathe without you tracking every step." Ethan didn't follow her. He stood in the hallway long after she left, watching the door, hoping it wouldn't be the last time she walked through it. Grace took the girls to a hotel across town. Just for a few days, she told them. A little vacation. She didn't want to explain the truth. Not yet. That night, as they slept in twin beds beside her, she sat by the window, phone in hand. A message from Ethan. No pressure, no asking, just letting you know. I'm here when you need me. She didn't reply. Meanwhile, across the city, Adam walked into a warehouse filled with screens, security feeds, public cameras, stolen footage, a live feed from outside the hotel. He smiled. "She's almost ready," he whispered. "Just one more crack, then she'll break." Grace didn't tell anyone where she was going. She left a note for the hotel staff with emergency numbers, instructions for the girls. She kissed them each on the forehead, whispered a silent prayer, and slipped out before sunrise. The city was quiet, still blanketed in fog. She walked with purpose, not because she felt brave, but because fear had become background noise now, a hum she could finally walk through. She took a cab across the bridge to an address she had memorized but never intended to use. It was the last piece of the file she had built herself, her own research, her own trail, Adam's hideout, a warehouse dressed as a repair shop, the kind of place no one looked twice at. She stood outside for a full minute before going in. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "I know you're here." Adam stepped out of the shadows like he'd been waiting all along, older now, leaner, but the eyes were the same, cold, empty. "Didn't think you had it in you," he said, almost amused. "And yet," Grace replied, "here I am." He circled her slowly. "No bodyguards, no Blake, just me. That's dangerous." "For you," she said. "Not for me anymore." He chuckled. "You really think you've changed? That a new apartment and a rich man's pity erased who you are?" Grace didn't flinch. "I didn't come here for your opinion. I came for my closure." "Closure?" he echoed. "What a pretty word. Like you didn't crawl back to me every time you got scared." Her voice was like steel. "And then I crawled away. Far enough that even you can't twist the memory." Adam's smile faltered. "Why now?" "Because you keep knocking on my life," she said, "and I'm done answering. You don't get to watch me anymore. You don't get to own me anymore." He stepped closer. "You came here to threaten me." "No," she said. "I came to remind you that your power was always a lie. You made me believe I couldn't survive without you. But look at me. I did." For a moment, the silence was suffocating. Then Adam lunged, quick, predictable. She dodged, not because she was faster, but because she was ready. He slammed into a table, cursing. She pulled the phone from her pocket, pressed a button. "He's here," she said. "Send them in." Sirens wailed outside. Adam's eyes widened. "You set me up?" She nodded. Finally. The door burst open. Officers stormed in. Adam was restrained in seconds, screaming her name like a curse. Grace didn't look away. She watched him struggle, watched the cuffs click shut, watched the man who once owned every breath she took become small. She exhaled, slow, steady. It was done. At the precinct, she gave her final statement. Clean, honest, no tears, no flinching. The officer looked at her with quiet respect. "You did good," he said. "Most don't make it this far." "I didn't come to survive," she replied. "I came to end it." When she returned to the hotel, the girls ran into her arms. She hugged them hard, burying her face in their hair. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Harper asked. "I am now," she said. "I really am." That night, for the first time in years, Grace slept without waking in fear. And in another part of the city, Ethan watched the news feed, saw Adam's face, heard Grace's name. He didn't call her. He just smiled. The next morning, she knocked on the door of the penthouse. Ethan opened it, surprised. "I thought—" "Don't," she said. "I'm not here to go back to what we had." His face fell, but he nodded. "I'm here to start something new," she added. "With no secrets, no control, just truth." Ethan stepped aside, eyes misted. "Then come in." She entered. The air warmer than she remembered. The home no longer felt like his. It felt like theirs. The girls followed close behind, laughing. "I'm proud of you," Ethan said, voice thick. "You didn't need me." "I did," she replied, "but not to save me, just to stand with me. And now, I can finally stand on my own." They stood together at the window as the sun broke. Through the fog. Two people who had been shattered and rebuilt, not as a love story, not as a rescue, but as survivors who chose to live forward. The apartment was quieter than Grace remembered, not silent, but calm. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed and the air still vibrates with what once was. She moved slowly through the living room, touching familiar things: the back of the couch, the photo frame on the shelf, the soft, worn armrest, where Harper used to nap. This wasn't her first time in the space, but it was the first time she entered without fear or dependency. Ethan watched from a distance. He didn't hover. He didn't ask questions. He just observed. That was the difference now. He was waiting for her to decide what came next, not trying to decide it for her. Grace appreciated that more than she could say. "Where are the girls?" she asked finally. "In the garden with Mrs. Hartley," he replied. She insisted on letting them plant something. "New beginnings," Grace murmured, almost to herself. Ethan nodded. "Something like that." He offered her a cup of tea. She took it with a small smile. The gesture was simple, but it meant everything. They sat at the kitchen island like they had so many times before, but the air between them had changed. No longer thick with secrets, just tentative peace. Grace was the first to speak. "I hated you for about 2 days." "I know," Ethan said quietly, "but not because you followed me, not even because you had that file. I hated you because I let myself believe in something, and it felt like you made that belief a lie." He nodded, eyes on the counter. "I never meant to build something false." "I know," she said, "but it wasn't your story to write." Ethan's voice was low. "I didn't fall for the version of you I read in reports. I fell for the woman who made it out of them." Grace's breath hitched. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time, she saw the man without. The savior complex, without the grief armor, without the control. Just Ethan. Just human. "I don't know what we are," she said, "but I'm not scared of figuring it out anymore." They didn't kiss. Not yet. There was something more, sacred than that in the moment. Understanding. Forgiveness. The beginning of something real. Not dramatic, not explosive, just steady. That night they had dinner with the girls. Chicken nuggets, mashed potatoes, laughter. Hazel drew a picture of a house with hearts around it. "It's us," she said. "But now the door is open." The next morning, Grace started organizing her things in the guest room. Ethan noticed. "You can have the master," he said. "You and the girls." Grace smiled. "That's your space." "It doesn't feel like mine anymore," he replied. "Not without you in it." She shook her head. "Let's not make old spaces work. For new people. We'll grow into something together, room by room." Later, they visited the nursery. The door was open now. The air inside was lighter. The little plant she'd left by the window had grown, reaching toward the light. "She'd be proud of you," Grace said softly. Ethan closed his eyes. "And of you." They stood there in silence, not mourning, but honoring, not clinging, but remembering. "I don't want to erase the past," she said. "I just want to stop living under it." They began making small changes, painting walls, rearranging furniture, donating things, not to forget, but to reclaim. The penthouse began to breathe again. Grace found her rhythm. She took a part-time job at a literacy program. Ethan continued running his empire but spent more time in the garden, laughing with Harper and Hazel, learning what it meant to father without possession. One evening, they hosted a small dinner. Just a few friends, the first time in years Grace felt comfortable sharing her space. She watched Ethan tell a story that made everyone laugh, saw the light in the girls' eyes as they sat curled beside him. And, for a fleeting moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. After everyone left, Grace stood beside Ethan at the sink, drying dishes. "You know," she said, "you're not who I thought you were." He raised an eyebrow. "That a good thing?" "It's the best thing," she said. He smiled. "And you're stronger than you think." "I'm still learning how to believe that," she replied. "Then let me remind you. Every day." That night, as the city lights blinked in the distance, Grace stood on the balcony, arms wrapped around herself. Ethan stepped behind her, careful, gentle. She leaned back against him, just enough to say, "I'm here." And he wrapped his arms around her, not as protector or rescuer, but as partner. Equal. Present. "We're not perfect," she said. "No," he replied, "but we're real." It began with a knock, just like before. Grace was alone in the apartment, the girls at school, Ethan in a meeting across town. The knock was gentle, unassuming, but her body reacted before her mind did. Her hands went cold. Her pulse skipped. She walked slowly to the door, peeking through the peephole, and saw a delivery man, ordinary, clipboard in hand. She relaxed. A little. She opened the door cautiously. "Package for Grace Miller," the man said. No emotion. She signed quickly. He handed her a sealed envelope, nodded, and left. No box. No wait. Just that envelope. She closed the door, locked it, then stood there for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a photograph. Grainy. Black and white. A child. In a hospital bed. The name tag. Lily Claire Bennett. Grace's breath caught. She stared at the image. Below it, handwritten words. "Not everything he told you was true." Her fingers tightened around the photo. Her mind raced. She had accepted Ethan's version of the story. A tragic accident. A woman lost in grief. A child gone. But now, what if the child hadn't died? What if the story he told her had a missing piece, the most important one? Ethan returned 2 hours later. Grace was waiting in the living room, the photo on the table between them. He saw it. Froze. "Where did you get that?" "Answer the question," she said. "Is she alive?" Ethan didn't speak at first. Then he sat, his face a mask of something unreadable. "She was," he said, "for 3 more months. After Claire's crash, I lied." Grace's heart slammed. "Why?" "Because she didn't die in the crash," Ethan said, "but she didn't survive either. Her body did. Her mind didn't. She was in a coma. And when she passed, 3 months later, I couldn't survive the second death." He buried his face in his hands. "So I told the world she died in the crash. I buried them both at once." Grace's voice trembled. "You made everyone believe." "Because it was easier," he said. "Because I couldn't take the pity, the headlines. I couldn't stand watching people wonder if I should have saved her. I needed it to be final." Silence pulsed between them. "You built a life on a lie," Grace whispered, "and then you tried to build one with me." Ethan looked up. "That lie died with me years ago, but you brought me back to life. I wasn't hiding it from you out of malice. I was trying to survive." She paced the room, emotions crashing like waves. "Why now? Why send this? Who knew?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Only one person had access to that photo. The doctor who was with me that day. And he's not the kind of man to randomly send mail." Grace felt her stomach twist. "Adam." Ethan nodded. "It's his last move. A dying shot. He wanted you to doubt me. One last time." She sat down hard, and it almost worked. Ethan approached, slow, careful. "Ask me anything. Anything. I'll tell you all of it. No more shields." "I don't need more facts," she said. "I need to feel like I can trust you again." He knelt beside her. "Then let me show you every day, from here forward. No more graves between us. No more ghosts." She looked at him, pain still etched in her eyes, but beneath it something else. Resolve. "Then we start over, not from lies, not from tragedy, from truth." He nodded, his hand reaching for hers. "Truth," he said, "even when it hurts." That night they sat together in the nursery. Ethan told her everything. The 3 months. The visits. The moments he couldn't share with anyone. Grace listened, no judgment, just presence. They cried, together, for Lily, for Claire, for the pain they carried in silence. And as dawn approached, they sat holding hands, not as survivors, anymore, but as people who chose to live beyond what broke them. In a distant cell, Adam watched the news broadcast from a wall-mounted screen. The story of his final card hadn't made the impact he wanted. Grace and Ethan hadn't shattered. They had solidified. He stared blankly as the screen cut to black. For the first time, he was the one without control. Spring arrived quietly, like an apology for the winter that had nearly broken them. The city was beginning to bloom again. Not loud, not dramatic, but gently. As if reminding everyone that healing didn't come with fireworks. It came with small moments. Birds returning, children laughing on sidewalks, light lingering longer in the evening sky. Grace stood on the balcony, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the railing. She had found out a week ago. A routine checkup. Nothing expected. The doctor smiled as he turned the screen toward her. A heartbeat. Life. New. Unplanned, but not unwanted. She hadn't told Ethan yet. Not because she was scared, but because for the first time, this wasn't something she needed to process in panic. It was something she wanted to hold on to for just a moment longer before sharing. Ethan had changed. Not in the surface ways. He still drank his coffee too black, still read the paper at the counter, but in the deeper places. He no longer hovered. He no longer tried to predict. He asked. He listened. And that, more than any grand gesture, was what convinced Grace that the future wasn't just possible. It was safe. That evening, he took her to the rooftop garden. The girls were already there, dressed in white, holding wildflowers. A small table was set. No guests, no photographers. Just them. Grace blinked. "What is this?" Ethan smiled nervously. "I didn't want a wedding. I wanted a promise. No fanfare, no vows in front of crowds. Just us." He knelt, not with a ring, but with a letter. "Read it later," he said. "But for now, will you stand with me? Not just today, but through everything?" Grace knelt too. "I already have, and I will." They kissed, soft and certain. The girls clapped. Harper ran forward. "Are you married now?" "Sort of," Grace smiled, "in all the ways that matter." They ate dinner under fairy lights. Hazel sang a song she made up on the spot. Grace's laughter filled the air. It was the kind of happiness that didn't feel borrowed anymore. It was earned. Later that night, Ethan found the courage to ask, "You've been quiet today. Something on your mind?" Grace took his hand. "There is. But it's something good." She reached into her pocket and handed him a photo. A sonogram. His eyes widened. "Is this—" "Yes," she said. "You're going to be a father." His voice broke. "I already am. But now, again." They stood in the nursery once more, now truly alive. Grace placed the sonogram on the windowsill beside the plant. "This one grows with us," she said. "No more secrets." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Only truth," she smiled, "even when it's messy. Especially then." The next morning, they told the girls. Harper jumped up and down. Hazel asked if the baby would like peanut butter. Grace laughed so hard she cried. Life wasn't perfect. The past still lived. in echoes. But the future was loud now, bright, demanding to be lived. Across town, Grace donated her letters, the ones she once wrote in fear, to a shelter. "Let someone else read them," she told the director, "someone who needs to know that survival is just the beginning." The woman nodded. "You'll save more lives than you know." Grace smiled. "I just saved mine." As the days passed, the apartment changed. Walls painted, new furniture brought in, not to erase memories, but to make space for more. Grace taught literacy 3 times a week. Ethan invested in programs for abuse survivors. The girls started dance class. The baby began to grow, quiet and steady. And one afternoon, as they all sat watching the rain fall gently against the windows, Grace whispered, "This is it, isn't it?" Ethan turned. "What?" "Happiness. Not the loud kind. The quiet, earned kind. The kind that stays." He nodded. "Yes, this is it." The seasons shifted again. Summer arrived without apology, bold and golden. The city pulsed with light, and in a quiet corner of Tribeca, a home breathed steady, full of life. Grace stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, her belly round beneath a loose dress. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching on the glass, dancing across the baby-mobile hanging in the corner. She wasn't scared anymore. Hazel and Harper sat on the rug, building towers with blocks. "Will the baby like this?" Harper asked, placing a toy giraffe on top. "He'll love it," Grace replied. "How do you know it's a boy?" Hazel asked, skeptical. Grace smiled. "I don't. I just feel it." Ethan walked in moments later with grocery bags, kissed Grace's temple, and handed Hazel a small box of cookies. "Because builders get snacks." That afternoon, they walked together through the park. Grace didn't hold his hand. She didn't need to. Their pace was the same. Their steps aligned. The girls chased butterflies and shouted about ice cream. Ethan carried a folded blanket under his arm. They sat in the grass beneath a tree. Grace leaned back and rested against him, her head on his shoulder. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. "No," Ethan said honestly, "but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Later that night, Grace lit a candle on the windowsill, not for mourning, for memory. One flame for Lily, one for Claire, one for the version of herself that had almost been lost. She stood in silence for a long time. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her belly. "They would be proud of you," he whispered. "I'm proud of you." She turned, resting her forehead against his. "I'm proud of us." The baby arrived in late August. It was early morning. The hospital room smelled like lavender and light. Hazel held Grace's hand. Harper played nurse. Ethan paced. Then, a cry, loud, clear, alive. They named him Noah James Blake. He had Ethan's eyes, Grace's smile, and a grip stronger than anyone expected. They brought him home in silence, not from solemnity, but reverence. The apartment had already been rearranged. Crib beside the window, mobiles spinning gently, lullabies filling the air. Grace sat in the rocking chair, Noah pressed against her chest. "We've been waiting for you," she whispered, "and now you're here." Months passed. The world kept spinning. But inside that home, everything slowed. On Sundays, they baked cookies. On Wednesdays, they painted. Grace wrote again. Not letters of farewell, but journals full of hope. Ethan built toy castles, told bedtime stories about warriors who fought without swords and kings who ruled with kindness. He never said the word broken again. One evening, Grace took the girls to visit the shelter where she once slept. She brought clothes, toys, food, but mostly she brought presents. She spoke to the women there, told them about fear, about survival, about rebuilding. "It's not about being rescued," she said. "It's about choosing to stand, even when your legs shake." She became a voice, a mentor, a mirror. Ethan watched from the back, Noah in his arms, his eyes wet but proud. She had risen, and she had brought others with her. That night she whispered to him, "I didn't need a hero. I needed a place to land. And you gave me that." He kissed her hand. We gave each other that. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the world was asleep and the house filled only with the soft breaths of children, Grace would walk the halls. She would touch the door frames, adjust blankets, kiss foreheads, and in those moments she finally understood. She had survived not despite the pain, but through it, around it, beyond it. Life had not returned to what it was. It had become something better, not perfect, not easy, but full, real. And Grace, who once knelt in the cold begging the world for mercy, now stood tall in the warmth of everything she had built. Her story wasn't one of rescue. It was one of rebirth. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.